Hello, Jantans and Jantanites. It is Jason Desmond from the Jantan Collective. Welcome to a brand new edition of What's Up With That, where we question, we learn, and we grow. Now, please remember to subscribe, like, comment below because we want to hear from you. Maybe there's something that's been bugging you about what we said, or maybe there's just something new that we should be talking about. Please do tell us. Now, uh, you'll notice that I'm working from home. I'm broadcasting from home right now. Why? Because the COVID-19 infection rates here in Malaysia has spiked. We're in the 3,000, 4,000 at this particular moment. And the only way to flatten the curve at the moment is by restricting our movements with a movement control order. Yes, the vaccines are out there, but the government has deemed that this is what we need to do. But also, more so than that, Malaysia is also under a state of emergency. What's up with that? This is going to be a very interesting chat. We have with us new Sin Yew advocate. He's also known as Amir Bon, and apparently he's a gooner, or as they call these fans these days, a goner, because Arsenal's not doing very well these days. Sin Yew's not very happy with that, but come on, Sin Yew, you have to admit, Arsenal, come on, really?
We are unbeaten in 4, so look at the bright side of life.
Oh my God. We also have with us a good friend of ours, Zan Azlee, journalist, columnist, and also owner of fatbidin.com. You got to check it out. It's hilarious. Zan, have you figured out your connection issues already?
I hope so. You can see me and then I think I'm okay.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. We can see, we can hear you clearly, but we're all trying to figure out how life is now that we're back in MCO 2.0, I suppose. All right. So let's get straight into it. I suppose let's get your thoughts on this, being a lawyer, because we just really want to get around this concept of state of emergency. When we talk about state of emergency, when we go through the history books and whatnot, the first thing that I think of is May 13, 1969, where things were bad, and then you needed a state of emergency to stop the killing, stop the riots and whatnot. Why do we need state of emergency right now?
Yeah, so like you rightly said, we had a state of emergency during the May 13 riots. So the Prime Minister thought that at that point in time, there was this grave threat against the public order, national security, or economic life of the country. So he decided to call an emergency where the government is given a lot of powers, and the government can basically pass laws without scrutiny or without going through parliament.
That's not just a lot of power, that's all powerful, right?
Yeah. Basically the government becomes almighty. It's like a god mode, if you play a game. So during the duration of an emergency, the government gets to decide on anything. And that is basically what is happening now, where the government is saying that there's this threat in the form of the pandemic, where they need to make decisions very quickly, and they cannot have parliament around to decide, because it's probably going to take too long.
Okay.
So that is how an emergency is supposed to work. But whether or not that actually is happening right now, I think there's a lot of people who are saying that no, there isn't such a grave threat to the nation, because the pandemic has been dealt with in the past through your various MCOs, MCO, CMCO, RMCO. So why do you need an emergency? Because calling it an emergency itself, it's not going to help scare the virus away or resolve the issue of the pandemic. It's still going to be there.
Yeah, because number one, I think it freaked a lot of people out. Zan, you've been out and about before covering a lot of news pieces and everything. Were you getting the feel of how people were like when this state of emergency was even discussed? And because this was not the first time it actually was brought up, they tried to before, it didn't work, and then now it really happened, and then people were like, "What the hell does that mean?" Right? How is it on the ground?
Well, I think the most obvious chatter that you can hear among the public in the public sphere is that, oh, this is something political. He's trying, the prime minister is trying to hang on to power because he doesn't have a majority in parliament anymore. So declare an emergency. At least he's got until August to still be the prime minister. I mean, that is what the chatter is among the public right now, lah. So I think a lot of people are seeing that as the reason. True or not, we won't know, but that's the main chatter right now, lah.
But is that a chatter from the media that they're bringing that up, or is that what they're hearing from the other side of the fence politically?
Well, if number one, if you read the media, they are saying that all these politicians are saying it, economists are saying it. They interview lay people, they do vox pops with lay people. They're saying it. If you I don't know, if you open up your social media networks and you look at your timeline, I think a lot of people are also saying that, So yeah, the observation is that that's the feel of the ground right now.
Yeah, because I was having a chat with some people. It was a radio station in Singapore, and then they were asking me the same question: what's the feeling like on the ground here? So I started asking different people who are doing business, people who are like just trying to get to work and everything. And I'm trying my level best to not get sucked into the social media kind of stuff, right? Because I deleted my Facebook account at one point, right? Because I'm like, my God, there's just so much going on. So I'm trying to get the real picture here. From where I was, I found like some of the businessmen, like the small town Kedai Runcit guy, he was like, as long as it doesn't affect my business, I'm okay. They can do whatever the fuck they want, right? Because it's affecting my pocket right now. Like they said, and I quote, like, this guy actually, I won't mention names, but he said, the first MCO, we were so good, and then they had the elections. And then I'm so glad that now this emergency happened so that they cannot have elections. Is that also one of the things that's happening, like with the state of emergency? That's also one way to control not having elections in a way, Sin Yew?
Yeah. So what the government gets to do when it declares an emergency, it's is that it doesn't have to follow what the normal rules of the constitution provides. So, for example, the constitution says that if you have if parliament is 5 years old, you need to call for a general election. Or, for example, if there's a vacancy in a seat of parliament, you would have to call for a by-election for that particular seat. Or when the prime minister loses confidence and he asks for a dissolution of parliament, you would then have to call for a fresh election if the king says that king consents to the dissolution of parliament. So when you have an emergency, the government can pass a law which is known as an emergency ordinance to suspend certain provisions or to change certain provisions in the constitution, and that would include the calling for elections and the sitting of parliament. So yes, you can avoid having an election by calling an emergency, because the government gets to change the constitution without going through parliament, and normally you would require two-thirds vote in the parliament to approve any change of a constitution, and under this political climate, that's just quite impossible. So no elections for the time being.
But what do you think about what happened the last time? I mean, like in Sabah when the election was called. Of course, a lot of people say, "Oh no, but the strain didn't come from Sabah. The numbers came from somewhere else. It had to come from somewhere because the number of infections just kind of exploded when that happened." So when you think about it, it just makes sense, right? So no elections means a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in how the virus spreads, but if you look at the numbers, ever since we had that state election in Sabah, the numbers didn't go down. It only went up and it went up and it went up. And one might ask that question: why didn't you call for an emergency on Sabah to suspend the election there? So now you have to look back at where the political lines are drawn. Sabah was known as an opposition state. So when they decided to call for an election, maybe that was something which the current ruling government thought, oh yeah, why not? It gives us a chance to take over control of that state. But when the reverse happens, they decided, yeah, let's not have an election. So, same standard does not necessarily apply across the board. And ever since Sabah State Legislative Assembly has been dissolved, we have been seeing increased numbers of the pandemic, and it doesn't look like we're getting out of the cave.
Yeah, apparently it's going to get a lot worse before it actually gets better, right? But Zan, in your recent article, you talked about being concerned about how the people are being represented, right? So now, because there technically is no representation, it's state of emergency. Tell us more about people being represented right now.
I think elections is something that's past already lah. You want to hold elections because people are saying that the prime minister might not have the majority, might not have the support, and hence they want to call for elections and all that. But let's set that aside, because for me, like, the emergency is already there. It's been gazetted already, right?
Yeah.
And all I'm concerned about right now is, like what you said, will the people be represented when there is an emergency? Because as Sin Yew has said, the power lies in the cabinet. It lies in the executive now because of emergency. So there's no opposition to raise any questions if anything goes wrong. There's no MPs who are representing the people who can actually raise issues if they feel that the government is doing something that is not satisfactory. And okay, the government said that they're going to form a committee, and that committee will then advise the Agong if everything is safe, should they call off the emergency, if everything's okay or not, right? But we don't know the consistency of that committee. They said they will call 3 members of the opposition. Okay, fine, you've got 3 members of the opposition, but then how many other members are they going to be, and will they all come from the ruling party?
Right.
Will civil society be represented in this committee? Will unions be represented? Will organizations, companies, corporations, and all that be represented?
Will everyone get hurt, basically?
So
right?
that's a big concern that I have. Yeah. Another concern that I have also is that if you remember, when the Prime Minister made the statement, he said that nobody should undermine the efforts of the government when it comes to undermine the efforts of the government in trying to fight COVID-19. And if anybody is found doing that, they will take action. So what would be considered undermining the government's efforts in fighting COVID-19?
Yeah.
I think consistently all of Malaysia wants to fight COVID-19, right? Everybody has that intention of beating the virus and going back to normal and all that. But the government needs to define what is it that is wrong that would be considered undermining, and action can be taken against us. Because then we don't know what to do. What if what if people want to criticize? What if people want to question certain actions that are being taken? Would that be considered undermining? So it's not clear, and that's worrying for me.
But that's actually how things have been for the year in many cases, right? I mean, a lot of the COVID, the action plan to beat COVID and everything, it's been one person says this, and then another agency says something else, and then they conflict each other. Like just now, and can I tell, like right now, I just ordered food. Right before this was supposed to be 8 p.m. Right, so now things are 10 p.m. Then I still don't have my food yet, so people are all confused right now. So that's my dilemma. It affects me personally right now, right? Because there's no transparency, no one really knows what's going on. And you're right, Zan. Because if you ask questions, is that going against the government, basically, right? So I guess what I'm really trying to get at is, ultimately, it's for our good. The people's goods, right? So if the people says, you know what, as long as my life isn't really badly affected, and I still get to make some money and take care of my family, and I at some point probably get the vaccine if I want to, then it's okay. But what if you go the distance and then start, like, you're not supposed to go out, like it's a real emergency. If you do anything, the army's going to come and get you, because technically that's what a real state of emergency, isn't it, Sin Yew?
Yeah, so this is a different kind of emergency. You see. One would rightly question oneself, who or what is this emergency saving? Is it saving the country, or is it saving a certain individual's political career or political life? But just to go back to what Zan had said, how does this affect the layperson on the street?
Yes, my pocketbook.
Yeah, I mean, to a large extent, it doesn't until it does. And when it does, the question you have to ask is, how can I get the government to be accountable? Traditionally, we do it by way of having elections. If you're not happy, we change the government. Or we do it by parliament. We get our MPs to question the government and ask, hey, why are you doing this? It's affecting my life. Now both outlets are gone. How do you question the government?
Well, technically, Sin Yew, the last time we did change the government, it didn't really make a difference also because things went back to the same way. And technically, some might argue that it's actually even more confusing right now because there's just not two groups now. There's multiple groups now.
Yeah. No, I like it that way.
You know that they even part of the emergency also, it says that the government, no government officials can be held accountable. You can't take legal action against the government, the cabinet.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But it goes back to that very basic point. If it affects me, how do I complain? I have no way to complain. I have to just accept it, and that's not great. Because in a pandemic, in a situation where there is an emergency, you would want to have increased scrutiny, especially if it's going to be certain measures that are taken that's going to affect very important aspects of your life.
Yeah.
For a lot, the decision to extend the opening time, take your situation from 8 to 10, that's a matter of life or death for them because it's their livelihood, you see.
And I have no food for dinner.
And you have no food for dinner, Some would starve. And, you probably would have to starve. But the question of extending it from 8 to 10, how am I going to complain? I'm going to take it to Twitter? I'm going to take it to Facebook? No, because it's quite easily ignored. As effective as social media could be, it's very easy to turn it off.
Actually, on that, Sin Yew, are they allowed to, let's say I start bitching about stuff like on online on Facebook, on Twitter, whatever it is, right? And I'm like, they shouldn't do this. How can this be? Now DBKL parks are closed again. Let's say they use words. Let's say they use stupid, don't know what they're doing, idiots and everything. Because in the past, if you get stopped at the roadblocks and then a cop questions you and everything, and then you use the words, let's say stupid and stuff like that, they can pull you in, right?
They can, but they shouldn't.
Right.
But if you do it on social media or you do it on Facebook, the way I see the law is that the law doesn't allow them to pull you in. It's not a crime. It's not a crime to insult somebody. It's not a crime to be offensive. But they are doing it. They are abusing existing provisions of the law, which are very vague, very broad. Have a look at it. Section 233 of the Communications and Multimedia Act, 1993.
233. That's always behind the back of my mind. 233.
Because you're a journalist.
What is that?
Any journalist will be worried of that because they are using it against journalists.
What is 233?
It's basically a law which says that if you say something that is offensive with the intention to annoy somebody, you would be committing a crime because you are misusing a network facility. So you can be imprisoned or you can be given a very hefty fine. And a lot of Facebook users or Twitter users, they have been investigated under that provision. The most famous one, I think it was Al Jazeera. Right. A few months back, they were being questioned,
investigated, right?
Yeah, for something they mentioned about migrant workers in Malaysia. So that's an example where laws are being used to silence certain individuals from questioning the government or questioning what certain government officials are doing. So that's bad,
So if, let's say in the state of emergency now, I do say something, because usually they're not supposed to pull me in or whatever it is, and I'm just a layperson. I'm not a journalist. I'm not anything. I'm a person who's really, really upset, really, really angry because I didn't get my food and my whatever. They've affected me and everything. Usually they don't pull me in, but in a state of emergency, because rules are different. How different are rules and how different are laws during a state of emergency that I can be pulled in without any ISA in a way?
Okay, the only difference now, it's not going to change anything when an emergency is called. It's what happens after an emergency is called. When an emergency is called, the laws are all the same, but the rules governing the making of laws,
Yeah.
that changes substantially. Normally, the government it's not the government that make laws, it's parliament that make laws. So the process is very slow. There's a lot of scrutiny involved. There's a lot of questioning involved. But during an emergency, the government doesn't have to make laws by going. It's not the parliament that make laws. It becomes the government that make laws.
Can they
So the
make
process is
up
much
laws?
faster. Say again?
Can they just make up laws right now?
Oh yeah, they can. They can. All that needs to be done is just the prime minister to sign off, instead of having it being debated in parliament and you go through a vote. So that process is it's being curtailed through an emergency. And now, so far, we only have this law, the emergency ordinance, one law, which the most important part of that law, there's nothing on free speech yet, but you can take control of properties, you suspend parliamentary sitting, you cancel elections for the time being. But there is nothing on free speech yet. If the government feels that, yes, maybe I need to control what people are saying about the government, because it's going to increase more dissent, more unhappiness,
Is it
more
sedition,
anger against
though?
the government, they can just pass a law without going through parliament to say
Right.
that, okay, now I'm going to punish, it becomes a criminal offense. Anyone that insults the government, every year it's punishable by up to 1 year or 3 years imprisonment. So suddenly we would see a greater curtailment of our freedom of speech, you see. So that's the danger. The emergency itself doesn't do anything. It's what the government can do after the emergency that's very worrying, because they have ultimate power.
Hey, can I ask Sin Yew a question?
Yeah, dude, chime in, man. It's all about Sin Yew answering stuff.
I know, like he's our legal counsel right now.
And it's free, dude. It's free.
Yeah, I probably need to find another
government-
area of law which will make me money, man. This is not going well.
During this emergency, if the government decides to form any laws or ordinances and all that, right? Will this law be there even after the emergency is over?
No. It expires in 6 months after the emergency is lifted. And
So this
unless
it's not a permanent thing, lah.
no, it's not a permanent thing unless Parliament decides to ratify that law. So it needs to be passed as a ordinary law in Parliament. These ordinances, otherwise it lapses within 6 months. So when Parliament finally reconvenes, Parliament can say, you know what, all these laws, I think we need it, lah. So they can just pass a motion to say that, yeah, okay, we'll pass all these laws, all these ordinances as an ordinary law, and then it will become permanent.
Zan, what worries you? Because besides the 233, just not that rule and everything, right? What worries you most about the state of emergency?
Oh, the fact that there is no check and balance. I think Sin Yew also mentioned that particular element where the government can basically do anything they want without any scrutiny, without any questioning by other people, and they can just pass it off. They could do it. Whether they will do it, that's a different matter, lah. But that is very worrying for a country with a population of like 30 over million people, and now it's being represented by two dozen cabinet members. So that is the biggest worry, because before this it was the food vendors, right? They wanted to do business, but 8 o'clock they had to shut down, and they were losing money. Who's going to represent them, right? Slowly, like JD, you were also saying, when it starts affecting people's pockets, people's wallets, everybody will start feeling it when it affects their wallets, right?
Yeah.
And where do they go with their grouses? Who's going to voice out for them, right? Like Sin Yew was saying, you can voice it out on social media, but social media is also very easily shut down. Whether they want to take it seriously or not, it's up to them, right? There is no formal way of voicing your grouses. So that is the most concerning.
What worries me is that, you know how Americans always go, I know my rights every time they get caught or whatever it is, right? That's the American thing. As a Malaysian, I don't really know my rights as in regular times anyway, right? But the thing is now, when it comes to the state of emergency, I really don't know what my rights are. What can I do? What can I not do? What should the layperson, Sin Yew, maybe just laid out kind of basically for us, what should we know about the state of emergency when it comes to us? What can we do? What can we not do? What can we expect? Are we being too pessimistic by thinking it's all political? What should we know?
Well, I think the most important thing that everyone should know is that even though Parliament is suspended, even though Parliament cannot sit, but there is still a Parliament. It's not dissolved.
Okay.
So what everyone that is angry and that they whoever that's unhappy about the fact that an emergency has been called, what they need to do is that they need to tell their member of parliament that is representing them in parliament that they are not okay with this. And they need to tell the prime minister that they are protesting against this emergency. Because what will happen if enough members of parliament unite and speak out against the suspension of parliament, against the proclamation of an emergency, and it's not the Haka, because even though the YDPA is the one that signs off on the emergency, but effectively under our constitutional scheme of things, it's a decision that is made by the prime minister. The YDPA consents to it, but because we operate under a constitutional monarchy, the YDPA, in a way, His Majesty, his hands are also tied because he has to act based on what is advised by the prime minister. So if enough members of parliament come out and say, and I think we saw Anwar today came out to say that at least 114 members of parliament who are against the emergency, putting aside that Anwar and mathematics, mathematics is not exactly his strong suit. But enough member of parliament come out saying that I'm not okay with the emergency. The prime minister is put in a very difficult political situation because he has 114 people, which basically forms parliament, saying that they're not okay, and it would simply mean that he has lost confidence of the majority, and he has a moral obligation as well as a legal obligation to go before the king to say that, look, I don't think I have confidence in the of the majority of parliament anymore, and I need to tender my resignation.
Mm-hmm.
And then two things can happen. Either the YDPA appoints another prime minister that could command the confidence of majority to weather us through this pandemic, or call for a general election. But I don't think a general election is the right thing to do currently. So, another prime minister will have to be appointed. But first, we must tell our member of parliament that, look, this is not on, man. You got to do something about it. And currently, a lot of members of parliament, they're very quiet, An emergency has just been called. The first emergency since nationwide, since 2011. But there is this deafening silence among the members of parliament, amongst politicians. And you wonder why. Nothing is more important than parliament being suspended and emergency being called, and yet everyone is quiet. Which
You
is
wonder
wrong.
what they're up to. What are the MPs doing? Are they going to work? Are they actually representing people during this time?
But that's their only job, isn't it, to represent people? That's the whole reason why they're elected. So it's very scary that no one is complaining because your right to representation, it's not there anymore. It's being suspended.
You know what worries
So
me a
would it
lot?
be
Sorry, Zan, yeah, go ahead.
would there be any effect if these members of parliament come up and say, look, we don't support the emergency, support the prime minister, we've got 114, this is more than 50% of parliament, but the emergency ordinance is already in effect. So legal, moral, is there really a legal obligation by the prime minister then to listen to these MPs?
I would say yes, there's still a legal obligation because the law doesn't suspend this part of the constitution. I think it's Article 43, if I remember correctly, where the prime minister can only govern if he has confidence of the majority. And the moment somebody comes out with support from 114 or 115 members of parliament, which is basically the majority, it indicates that the current prime minister does not have confidence of the majority.
Even in a state of emergency.
Even in the state of emergency. So, and what we have learned in the past is that you don't need parliament to sit to determine whether or not that prime minister, or in what happened in Perak, it was a chief minister, whether the prime minister has confidence of the majority. Because what had happened in Perak, what had happened in Sabah, is that they went before the Sultan, and they said that, okay, I don't have, I have confidence of the majority. The current chief minister doesn't have confidence of the majority anymore, so he has to resign. So that can still be done. Even if
Sheraton move, that was it.
Yeah, Sheraton. Yeah,
exactly. Because everything you said, Sin Yew, just now, they're not happy. The only option is for them to resign and whatnot. That happened during that Sheraton move, as Zan actually mentioned. Now the thing is, that another thing that you mentioned that kind of it's not worries me. It just kind of bugged me in a way. Is that you said the YDPA, the king's hands are tied, but he's the king. You know what I mean? In my mind, it's like, shouldn't he be like, shouldn't the prime minister's hands be tied on certain things because the king says, no, I represent the people now. You should do all these because I should limit your power. It's not. It seems to be the other way.
Yeah, that has been. That's the thing. There hasn't been much constitutional literacy amongst the population. So the fact that we are a constitutional monarch is not something that is apparent to many. So a lot of citizens, we still live under the impression that we have an absolute monarchy, that whatever the king says, no one else can say otherwise. But in reality, and also legally, the king doesn't get involved in the day-to-day running of government. He doesn't
figurehead in a way
involved into the whole political mess that politicians create. He's above that. He's dignified. He wouldn't bring himself down, and he shouldn't. And a lot of these things, it's being decided at the government using the king's name, which I think is very wrong.
Yeah.
You have to say that this is the decision that I made. Don't bring the king into this, even though the king, as a matter of law, he signs off on it. And to hide behind the king, or to use the king to justify the political decisions that you make, I think that is just wrong. Because
it's like parents disciplining kids. You do this, police come catch you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're dragging the king down, which I think is not right. The king is dignified. It's beyond that.
The question is though, like,
they need to have a Malaysian version of the crown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thing is, okay, so if we're not happy as a people, we go see the MPs, and then you need 114 MPs to say that we have lost the confidence in the leadership and whatnot, and we just lost Zan. Zan was so freaked out by what I said, his camera just flipped over. But anyway, so if we don't have the confidence in the leader, we need a minimum 114, right?
112.
112.
Because we have 222. So
okay, so it's
51%
112 minimum.
112.
Now, who goes to see the king? The king has the right to stop the emergency, is it?
What the king can do is that the king, once he is satisfied that the prime minister does not have confidence of the majority,
Okay.
he can summon the prime minister and say that, look, I don't think you're prime minister anymore because I have 112 people outside my gate saying that they have no confidence in you because you call for the emergency and they don't agree with it.
Mm-mm.
And then the prime minister would be in a position where he can no longer advise the king. So if the prime minister does not resign, what we have learned in the past through case laws is that the prime minister's seat, the seat or the office of the prime minister would be deemed to be vacant, and the king can appoint someone else in his place. But of course, the controversy lies in whether or not this gauging or measuring this majority support. How do you do it? For me, if you have 112 people to go before the king to say that, look, we all are in consensus here, we don't have any support in this prime minister, then I think the king, he would be put in a position where, okay, I think I have to do something about this.
Okay. All right. So ultimately,
Yeah.
still, the MPs will go see the king, and the king will still have some. Because right now it's supposed to be August, right? I remember it's supposed to end in August or something.
In August.
But he still has the right to tell whoever's in charge to say, look, get rid of this. Okay, I don't want a state of emergency anymore. He has to tell the prime minister.
What the king can tell the prime minister, because even on a day-to-day running of the government, if you watch The Crown, right, you would see Queen. It's very educational, You would see the prime minister would have these weekly consultation sessions to update the Queen as to what's happening in the government, and the Queen, sometimes would offer opinion, and but that happens entirely in private. So something similar would be in place between the YDBA and the prime minister as well. So privately between them, the YDBA can always counsel the prime minister.
Yeah.
He has the right to do so. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that he has a duty to do so.
Right.
And he can probably and what the king says carries a lot of weight.
Yeah.
But
I thought that's how it should be, right?
Yeah. Because you don't want to go against the monarchy. Politically, it's suicidal for you. But legally, what the king can do is not to tell the prime minister that I don't agree with the emergency, get rid of it. The king can't do that. The king can say that, but he can't cancel the emergency on his own. He would need the prime minister to advise him that I have to cancel the emergency. So otherwise, the king would effectively be acting without the advice of the prime minister, which is a big no-no under the federal constitution. But what the king can do without the prime minister's agreement is that if the king is satisfied that the prime minister doesn't have confidence of the majority,
right,
then the king can say, I'm going to appoint someone else.
I see. Okay. Right. Okay. Do you think this will go on all the way to August?
I think if it goes all the way to August and it stops there, that's great. My worry is that it carries on indefinitely, because the last nationwide emergency we had, it got extended for more than 40 years. I think almost 50 years.
Wait,
So
go back to that. Which one? So this is the 1969 one.
This is, yes. And
Okay.
we just came out from a state of emergency 2011 when Najib, declared the end of the emergency. So
but yeah, we live lives like it was just any other thing.
Yeah. So that's why I mentioned earlier, the calling of emergency, it doesn't change anything. It just changes the rules for government. But it's quite different then, because at least at that point in time, you have a semblance of democracy. A lot of what makes up democracy is still functioning because parliament wasn't suspended. And we had general elections every 5 years.
Hmm.
And you have a government that...
That's why
Oh,
it never occurred to me that we were in a state of emergency.
yes.
You know?
And that's actually a good thing. Because if you are in a state of emergency and you are reminded daily that you're in a state of emergency, that's bad for your political life, or for a layperson's everyday life, or for the economic life of the nation. You see, why would somebody want to come here to a country where emergency is being declared?
But we thrived though. I mean, like,
We did.
I didn't realize that we were in a state of emergency. I'm just a bit mind blown right now.
We did.
So
We did.
Did people just forget?
No, I think it's because you have a very strong government. Even though it's an emergency, you have a very strong government. You have prime ministers which have a very clear majority. You have parliament sitting. You have a lot of laws not being passed using this shortcut that the government has, even though they could. So even though the government could have ruled as though as
Iron Fist lah.
actual emergency with an iron fist, it didn't.
Right.
The worry now is that you have a government or you have a prime minister where we don't know. We don't know whether there's a majority, because if you take the last clear indication of the support of the government, which is the election or the budget was passed narrowly.
Yeah.
And the budget was passed narrowly. Was it the budget? I think it was the budget or the speaker, but either way, the support is hovering around 114 to 111, and then you have a number of other MPs who is supposedly on the prime minister's side, who is supporting the prime minister, coming out saying that they no longer support the prime minister. So that number dwindles. It could well fall below 111, which is less than 50%. So you don't know this government whether it has support of the majority, and you have no parliament to check on what this government is doing, and you have no election on a government that may not have support of the majority. We're sure, So all these things in place, you don't have legitimacy in whatever you are doing, because for you to have legitimacy, you need to have all these democratic institutions and a government having legitimacy to make decisions in place, and all that is not there because of the emergency, because it's been suspended.
Right.
So it's quite different from emergency that was called back in the 1960s.
Yeah.
That's why
I'm mind blown. I'm absolutely I never realized that we were in, because I was like, just life, 80s was cool. People had bad hair. I never knew it was the state of emergency. Basically, you're saying right now, it's like a ship that has a captain, and then the crew is going, does the captain really have a compass with him? Does he really know where he's going?
Yeah.
But the captain says, no, I'm fine. I know exactly where I'm going. Trust me on this. Basically, that's how we're running right now.
Yeah, just that we don't know whether this captain has the trust of the majority.
Oh, wow.
We don't. We're quite sure whether he has a compass, and we're also not quite sure whether he has the trust of the majority. So there's two things there in question.
So basically, the crew's going, this fella know where he's going or not.
Well, from the looks of things, I don't have much faith.
All right. This has been. I'm sorry. I'm still mind blown. I'm still so mind blown. I'm like, because when you say the last emergency we had, it lasted for 40, 50 years. I'm like, what the fuck? What? Seriously?
No, that's why it's important for us to say something about it, because if this emergency doesn't end in August, you're going to start to ask yourself, when is it going to end?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Zan, but I haven't been entirely confident in what the government has been doing for the past few months. You have MITI coming out with wake SOP. You don't know whether to open, you don't know whether to close, you don't know what letter you need to get. So you have a quite a widespread disorientation happening at the top level.
Yeah.
And it's quite hard to put any trust in them, and that coupled with the whole political situation, you start to wonder whether this whole thing is actually doing it for the purpose that they say they are doing. But I don't know about you, Zan. I have zero confidence in what's happening.
I second that. I'm with Sin Yew here.
Do you have friends who are considering? I think we're veering off here, but I just want to know, like, because of this, right? Who go? I'm considering migrating to somewhere else, though. Do you have friends who are thinking stuff like that?
It's not.
No.
Yeah, it's not. Even if there are, I can tell you, it's not because of the political situation. It's because of the economical situation.
Right.
That's more likely, yeah.
We are just not making much money here.
And
And
that's
our
just been
ringgit
going
is
on for
like
years, right?
pathetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just about this, right? All right, guys. This has been great. Just one final thought before you guys go. Like a football match, usually football talk shows, they always do this. Predictions. How long do you think MCO 2.0 will last? Give me a date, and then we'll do a check and see if it's wrong. We'll come back and have a chat again on this show, and then we'll go like, "Hey, you were wrong." Okay, so I need dates. Come on, give it to me.
Though we live in a life where it's a batch of 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. Okay, I'll tell you after February 4th. Okay, I'll see you February 18th. Then I'll tell you. Then I can give you a prediction.
Did you?
I think MCO early March, and then after that, it's it's a free for all.
Right.
We are on our own already.
If you could, though, if you were in charge, what would you do?
I will go on a full lockdown for at least 1 month to 6 weeks. That means everything closed. Because currently, you look at MCO. What is MCO? MCO is just the restaurants closing.
Hey, dude, there's traffic jams on the street. I come home.
Everyone
from
is
work.
working.
Yeah.
That's my point. Everyone is working. So it's just MCO in name, probably to scare people.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's the economic activity still continues. So people are still meeting people. So how is it going to stop the transmission rate?
So
It's
if
probably
you were
gonna
in charge, you would shut down all that. Everybody just
shut
stays at
down
home.
everything, take the bitter pill, shut down everything for 6 weeks. Government come in, step in to provide for those who cannot provide for themselves. That's why we pay taxes, right?
Yeah.
To save people, when the time comes.
Okay.
Not to
So
increase our bank balance.
that's from that's what YB New would be doing. YB Zan, if you were in charge, how would you run things?
If I was in charge, I would declare an emergency. If hypothetical, right? Hypothetical situation. If
You
I was
just
the
said
prime
don't
minister,
put any
I would
emergency.
call
You
for
would-
an emergency, and then during the emergency, I'm going to meet all of these 222 MPs, and I'm going to get them on board with me. Once I know that I've got majority, open up the emergency. Okay, that's it. No more emergency. Boom. That's it. I've got majority in parliament. That's it.
Now, me, if I was in charge, I would say I'm really caught between Sin Yew and Zan, because right now I I know a lot of people who are struggling with work, with businesses and everything. Their businesses have dropped. People who are in entertainment, they have not been able to perform. Food guys, especially the smaller ones. When the big guys start going, we need to start thinking of other stuff and pivot. You know that the small guys are not thinking that. They're thinking, can I survive for the next month? And then next, they shut down. So I'm kind of caught in between. I really hope things will get better soon. I hope the vaccine works. I'm going to be taking the vaccine definitely, only because I want to see whether I grow an extra arm out of my forehead. It's one of those strange things that it's a Resident Evil-y kind of thing, right? But I hope Malaysia recovers from this economically, health-wise, and also politically. But only time will tell, right? But Sin Yew, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This has been a very great chat. We'll talk again soon. Hopefully, the Gunners do better in the EPL as well.
I hope so too.
And Zan, it's a pleasure. Zan Azlee, thank you so much for your thoughts. And hopefully, the next time we chat, you buy a better Wi-Fi dongle.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
That was a great chat. I tell you what, guys, don't forget subscribe, like, and comment. Also, don't forget to click on that little bell button for all the latest notifications. And we want to hear from you. If there's something that you heard here that you want us to talk more about, you can comment. If there's something that you want us to talk about, we'll get in all the experts. Do comment and tell us. We want to hear from you. And that's the show. My name is Jason Desmond. This has been a Jantan Collective. This is What's Up With That. And as usual, don't be a dick.